Floor to him. So James R. Gill is a third-generation resident of Manhattan Beach, a past president of Leadership Manhattan Beach, past president of Harbor Chapter Sons of the American Revolution, past Manhattan Beach Cultural Arts Commissioner and Chair, U.S. Air Force veteran, Neighborhood Watch block captain, graduate of the Manhattan Beach Community Emergency Response Training and Community Police Academy. He founded the Manhattan Beach Pioneers in 2014. Before I give the floor to James, just showing, aside from all the community work he has done, how dedicated he is, today is his birthday. So we just have a little birthday cake for him. Wanted everyone, maybe we can sing, that's the, can we bring it to Jay? We can just sing a happy birthday. We have the cake though. Yes, we have a cake. So we didn't have the candle, but wanted to wish you happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear James.
Thank you.
All right, so that's one way to get yourself a birthday party is have a community meeting, bring out your friends, and have them sing for you. Thank you very much. That's very nice. When the date came up and it was my birthday, I thought this would be a fine thing to do for my birthday. So honored to be here. I basically put together a little presentation that's about why, the who, what, why of the pioneers, why I had an interest, why I started it, what it's all about. So I'll take you through that, and then we have a little short panel with some very senior ranking officials in town on the panel, so that'll be exciting too. Then we'll take some questions and we'll be done. So let's get it started here. My grandmother moved here in 1937 with her husband. They were from Anchorage, Alaska. And Bill Gill, my grandfather, his father up in Anchorage, Alaska, Oscar Gill, moved there about 1900. Was a lot of firsts in Anchorage, like first to deliver mail by dog sled to Seward, I believe, from Anchorage. He got heavily involved in the community, wound up being the mayor up there. And somewhere in there, in the 1930s timeframe, they created something called the Pioneers. And it was for the group that originally showed up in Anchorage and really, broke dirt. And I have a lot of cousins up there. Sadly, I've never been. It's on my bucket list. I probably have something like 40 cousins up there and a family house up on a lake. And I get to see pictures on Facebook all the time, but I've never been. But throughout my life, I've heard them talk about the Alaska Pioneers group. And I grabbed this off their website. It really is what motivated me to do this because look at that mission statement there, to preserve the names of all Alaska's pioneers on its rolls, to collect and preserve the literature and incidents of Alaska's history, and promote the best interest of Alaska. So just plug Manhattan Beach in there, and that's our mission statement right there. So that's kind of the why. There's a little bit more to it than that. I have a unique passion for this city that some people who were born and raised and lived all their lives, like my own children, who don't exactly think it's all that special or don't understand what's so special about it. But I, somewhere in elementary school, was forced to move away. Had to go with the parents. My dad got a job transfer up to Northern California at first. And then to Ohio, where I did junior high and high school. And fortunately, my grandmother was still in Manhattan Beach, and I was able to fly out every single summer. I don't think I missed a summer from Manhattan Beach. And that drove this extraordinary passion in me that, damn it, what the hell am I doing in Ohio, and who did this to me, and how do I fix it? And so every time I came here, I was hypersensitive to everything that was happening, and all of my grandma's friends. I enjoyed getting to know all of them. I think my family thinks I'm always hanging out with senior citizens all the time, which is my Sons of the American Revolution group, my Pioneers group. But I grew up hanging out with my grandma's friends, and so that's kind of a lot of the why. I have a passion, and my grandmother had a lot of friends. A lot of them have obviously passed away, including my grandma. She lived to 100 years old, and in 1907 she passed away. And then some of her friends passed away, and so I've lost a lot of those. But what I discovered is that there are a lot of senior citizens in Manhattan Beach who don't know each other, that I know through different channels, that don't know what's happening at city council meetings, that just aren't getting out much. So that was kind of the why for me to get this whole thing going. And then the what. You know, my grandmother had a collection of stuff that I discovered basically when she passed away, of photos, documents, and movies. I've actually got 8mm movies from the 1940s, including building their house. I have a clip that I'll try to show you in a few minutes. It doesn't show up very good on here, but we'll try to run it anyway. But here was a document that I inherited that shows that dark square is 6th and John. That was the property that my grandparents bought in 1940. And here's what it looked like in 1941 before they started building. So that, looking up that way right there, is John Street going up the hill, and 6th would be going down this way. That's same sort of thing, John Street going up here, 6th going down here. Love the obelisk there, even back all the way in 1941.
Oh, yeah.
That's looking down the hill from the back of their property. So John was a dirt road going down there behind that house there. That was, oh no, I've forgotten her name now. I'll think of it. What?
Welcome to the Pioneers.
Yeah, welcome to the Pioneers. Thank you, yes. That's when your memory starts to fade. So a grant deed, which I inherited, which has that unbelievable clause about if you ever sell this property to somebody who's not a white Caucasian, the property reverts back to the original owner. I was shocked when I read that. It turns out that all the properties had those back in those days, and they were eventually outlawed, and it didn't matter if it said that or not. I was trying to figure out if we could somehow get the house back. Building contracts. So if you see here, this is a contract to build a 6-bedroom house with a detached 2-car garage for $5,200. They were going to make 5 equal installments of $1,040. And then here was the trust deed, so they borrowed $4,200 in December of 1941 to purchase the land. Or that might have been to build, I can't quite remember, because I think in 41 at that point they already owned the land. Here's that same sort of view down John Street. So that's John, all dirt, paved, no paving going down there. And I still can't think of her name right there, that old house that was there. She passed away probably in the, must have been late 80s. But look at that, that's the hill section as just like an open field almost.
Can we go back to that?
Go back to what? Oh, go back to the hill. You'd like to, if you buy the hill section, you can go ahead and take all the houses off. You'd probably have a lot of support from the city itself. Turn it into a big park. That is the house being built. My grandmother standing in the doorway there with a white hat on. And so just some fabulous photos that I discovered after she was gone that really show the hill section there in the early 40s.
But the house is
No, I'll show you what it turned into. And it's funny to see that little palm tree, because when I was a kid, that thing was huge. There they are, all complete, the yard put in there. In a picture in a minute, you'll see this palm tree completely taking over the house practically. And then, of course, Steve's house over to the right, and Karakoff's house over to the left. That's a little Christmas card that they did after they were in their first house, my grandmother and grandfather. There's a shot of my dad surfing. Here's an interesting historical thing here. That's my grandma in the upper right, her mother right there. She's a daughter of a Civil War, who he actually died in a prison in the Civil War. So she actually moved here to Manhattan Beach near the end. Then she was in a nursing home in Redondo Beach, lived to be 102. And this was her 100th birthday, and I guess they gave her an honorary police chief pin back then in 1963. So just some fun history. That's my mom's group hanging out at 24th Street. She grew up over by the racetrack in Inglewood, but came to the beach in Manhattan Beach all the time. Met my father at El Camino College. So a lot of those kids are Maricosta kids from about class of 62. Here's my dad's class of 62 graduation photo. 62, yeah. And then that's probably right around 62 as well. That's my father in front of one of his favorite cars at 6th and John. There's that palm tree. And that's when I was born, Queen of Angels Hospital, 1965. There's me hanging out at Longfellow right there. You can see that house is still at the foot of Longfellow. Me learning how to surf. So just a few old photos that kind of, that was our first house over on Voorhees Avenue behind the Maricosta High School area there. So the point of showing you this is that a lot of people have wonderful photographs. I have unbelievable photographs that I'm blessed to have had. I don't know, my dad must have been really into it, and his dad must have been really into it because there was just pictures of everything. Here were some fun little things that I was involved in as a kid around town. Safety City, if anybody remembers Mary Ann Thompson's School of Swim.
Yeah.
And Tiny Tots, and I don't remember what that little cute picture was from, but one of these things. Here I am at Penny Camp School in 71. That was me in the plaid in the bottom left area there. Here's, this is like a 1970s shot of that same house. Now, of course, 6th Street completely paved, and John would be paved, and of course there's no empty spaces left anymore. But it's that same view. There's the grown-up palm tree. That was right before it got cut down. But it really took over the whole house for a while there. This is about the last photograph I have of the house. So my grandmother was burglarized. Somebody climbed in the kitchen window, and while she wasn't home, and went through and stole the family silver and some other things. And she wasn't, at that point, she was by herself in the house. My grandfather had passed away, and she didn't feel comfortable in there anymore, and so she was going to sell it. My dad decided that he would buy it, so I think they traded it for like $65,000 or something like that. It was certainly a fantastic deal for him, and that was going to be kind of his inheritance somehow. And so he took it over about this time frame. There it is without the tree when it was cut down. And he tried, he moved in it for a little while, then his job took him somewhere again. He was a CPA for Ernst & Ernst. That took him somewhere, and he tried renting it out. And our good friend Norma Wilson, if anybody knows the Wilson family, Robbie Wilson was one of our initial pioneers. I tried to invite him tonight, but he couldn't make it. But Norma Wilson lived in the house for a little while with her son, and there was constant repairs going on that was needed, and my dad decided to sell it so he could buy something nice where he was. So that was it in 1979. That's where the house was, right there. I happened to be in town when they bulldozed it, and was sad but happy I got the picture of it anyway. And then some people did a great job. I think the Spanish place that's there now is beautiful. It's very low lying. I've had a tour of it, and in the front corner in there, they have a front yard, a grassy area that's very nice. And so I think they did a good job, and it's not like one of those 3-story behemoths that are all over the hill section. So it's still like that today, and there's some nice people in there. The lady says that they make an offer to her like once a month. Somebody comes knocking on the door, and the last number I heard was an $8 million offer, and she turned it down. So here's when I lived on my own in a rental on 2nd Street. That was in the 90s. And then here's when things started to dramatically change. Just 10 years or so after I was out of that thing, somebody bought it and bulldozed it and put up this, and they wound up selling it for $9 million, almost $10 million. So that's when things really started getting crazy. But here's a wedding shot, Becca and I down by the pier. So that sort of shows the what. I wanted people to bring out their photos and tell their family stories at our meetings. I videotape the meetings so that we can sort of keep a record of it. And so the Who really was about Grandma Gill's friends. That's what it started as. And here she is. This is a picture of the Neptunian Club there in the bottom corner, probably in the 70s. She was a Neptunian for many, many years. She was a PEO member for 50 plus years. She had a special 50-year pin. We were never allowed to know what PEO stood for. They said Papa eats out or something like that. But it was about some of her friends and people that I knew around town that didn't know each other and getting them together for these meetings. So that's what brought us to our very first gathering. That's Don Spencer, who's here tonight to be on our panel. That's Robbie Wilson, who I'm named after his brother Jamie. And he, if anybody remembers Al Wilson Realty back in the day, that was Al's son Robbie. Robbie took over Al Wilson Realty for quite some time. I think Robbie owns upwards of 12 houses in town. Myself, and then of course Gary Mccauley, who's here also to be on our panel this evening. He's the president of the Historical Society, and basically we kind of came to the Historical Society and said, here's my idea, how can we sort of make this as a part of the Historical Society and just quickly get it up and running. And Gary led the charge, and we got a board vote, and we had our very first meeting in early 2015. That's a wonderful gathering with Anita front and center there. And for those that don't know, Anita in the front row here is our, I'm pretty darn sure, our reigning pioneer. She turns 100 next month. And she's lived in the city for 92 years. Wow. 92 years. So I did a little math, 8 more years, and she can be a double pioneer. We've never had a double pioneer before. That could be like an absolute first, so that would be great. We'll keep an eye on you for that one. But yeah, that was the very first meeting. We did that in the Historical Society Museum at Pollywog Park. It wasn't too long that we started to outgrow that room. And of course, since then, we've already lost some of our pioneers. Kay Whitehead is one of them, passed away in 2016. That's her on the left giving her talk at the Red House Museum there. And we also lost Pat Cunningham, who at the time was our reigning pioneer. And
Pat Cunningham.
yeah.
Yeah, he was, well, I think about 3 months older than I.
3 months older than you, yeah.
So, well, let's see, like 1919, I'm 1918.
So he might have been a year younger than you then?
1919, I was born 1918.
I grabbed that out of the newspaper, so I'm not sure how accurate it is, but he's one that we lost. Betty Young was the most recent pioneer that we lost. And fortunately, each one of them gave a wonderful 30-minute presentation. My whole goal was to try to get the older ones recorded first. That was something I really wanted to do. Here's a very recent meeting here this is literally last month, and that's Lynn Gross at the microphone up there. Lynn's sitting in the audience here. That was probably our biggest turnout for a Pioneers meeting. I think we had upwards of 30 people in there. They gave a wonderful hour-long presentation about their 50 years of living on the Strand with pictures throughout. That video is online for anybody to watch. I highly recommend it. It's probably the best presentation we've had. I tried to tell people in the audience, don't let it scare you. You don't have to be that impressive with it. I mean, they had rehearsed it and everything. They took turns at the microphone. It was very impressive. I tell people, it was wonderful, yeah. And I tell people, don't let that scare you. Just 20 to 30 minutes and a few photos and a few stories, and that's all we need. Back on that one slide right there, our next meeting, January 26th, coming up here in a few months, and we do it at the MBUSD building. One of our pioneers, Heather, works there and has like control of the schedule, and it's a very nice room. So that's when the next meeting is, January 26th. It doesn't matter if you're a pioneer or not. Anybody's welcome. The public's welcome to come hear the stories, and if we outgrow this room, we'll find a bigger room. We'll just keep it going. But there are 3 categories of pioneers. There's 50 years and above, which would be a full-fledged pioneer, soon to be double pioneer, and then there's associate pioneer. Gary's in the associate pioneer 30 to 50 year category. And then there's, because I wasn't quite at 30 years yet myself, as far as residency here, I had to do sons and daughters of pioneers to make sure I could be in my own club. So I consider myself grandson of Evelyn, who was a pioneer. So anybody's welcome to our meetings. If you want to write that down or take a picture of it or whatever, that's where you'll find my videos online. You will find all the Pioneer videos there, as well as my old family movies. And there's probably 4 hours worth of 1965 New Year's Eve parties, parties at the beach, my dad surfing for hours, and all kinds of crazy stuff if you want to see that. Including, and let me see if I can make this little clip run here, just so you can see one of these movies. Fun. Let's see if I can do that.
James, you might be a full-fledged pioneer by still having AOL.
I'm very proud of that. I got to fly on Steve Case's private jet one time, and I thanked him, told him I still use his AOL address, and he looked at me like I was crazy. So this is literally looking at 6th and John. That was John Street. I know it's going to be terrible on the screen here, but that 1941, right before they were building the house, that's my grandmother looking down, kind of towards down John Street. That's Catalina Island, obviously, back there in the background. In a second, you'll see them building. According to my father, these were some of my grandfather's friends who chipped in and stood out there smoking a pipe and digging dirt. So they had some friends and some contractors. I guess somebody must have known what they were doing. And that's literally them, 1941 to 42, building the house at 6th and John. So pretty amazing stuff that I got my hands on and was thrilled to have. And so the point is, you guys dig through your stuff, find out what you got, and let me know, and we'll have you guys give a little presentation, and you can tell your stories about growing up here. So with that, I would like to bring up my panel, my distinguished panel. I'll start with Don. Don, come on up. Don Spencer, 82 years old next month. Did I get that right? I think so. All right, 82 years old next month. He looks like he's 70-ish. And 70-ish. Is that pushing it too much? You should be looking like you're 60? 60. Yeah. He born here and lived here all his life. So 82 years here in town.
I built a boat. I'm one of those crazy people. I built a boat in my backyard here in Manhattan Beach, though.
Talk into the microphone.
Okay, can you hear me back there?
Well, Anita has her thing.
Did I do it?
Well, I don't know.
No, it's not working.
Yeah, I think you just have to point your face right into it and talk.
Hello.
There you go.
Okay, I happen to be born here because my parents happen to love the area. They came out from back east, discovered Los Angeles. My mother was an art student at Chenard's. My dad was a hard worker, and they discovered Manhattan Beach. They bought property in Manhattan Beach in 1930.
There you go.
Okay, I tell my teeth too.
Talk right into it.
Anyhow, they loved the beach. They went swimming every day. My dad would spend the money that my mother made as an artist working for Bullock's and other Macy's, pretty good department stores. She was one of those fashion artists, and one of the better ones, I might say. She was making money in the 1930s. My dad was making money in the 1930s. They could actually go out and spend $200 or $300 and buy a lot in Manhattan Beach. And then my dad could go out to Pat Blynn's or other lumber locations and build a small house. He built several stores on Manhattan Beach Boulevard. And my brother and I benefited greatly by that. But in essence, my thought was that we'd be here and share the joy of having so many years played out on a marvelous stage. And if there's anybody here who doesn't know how to appreciate this glorious stage on which we lived and which we played the process of living, I don't believe it. And we are family. I know I've got a few crazy uncles here and around, but I know we have Steve Napolitano here, and we are such a family that even before he reached his levels of success, I knew exactly how successful he would be. Steve, do you know how I knew that? Well, there you are. Okay, how did I know that you're going to be a success, Steve?
I played ping pong with you.
Before then. Before then.
Oh boy, I don't know.
Your mother told me. Every time I met her,
She's the one who said.
I knew how great Steve was going to become. And doggone it, he actually did it. And by the way, too, he can play ping pong.
No, you're much better than me.
At the end of the pier, it's the roundhouse, of course. Well, when I was a teenager, in that roundhouse were found a number of ping pong tables. And that was a recreation center. And I actually won an award there. I won a first place playing ping pong. Then another year, I won a third place playing much harder than I did for the first place. And I was delighted to have gotten the third place because those guys who came into town from somewhere else were really terrific. My background, I emulated my mother and my father. I emulated my mother by becoming an artist. And this is an example of a work that I painted sitting on top of my square-back Volkswagen. And I parked in a space on the north side of Manhattan Beach Boulevard in front of some stores that my dad built. But you notice that this is the Lamar and the Chevron Theater. And I was able to get on a bicycle and ride to marvelous locations, sit down with watercolor painting. So almost all of the watercolors I did were done on location. So I've had a little more time than most to sit and ponder the glory of my good fortune. Education-wise, I went to UCLA, BA, Otis Art Institute for Master of Fine Arts. I taught at El Camino for 10 years. Marvelous part of the world. Marvelous endeavor to be in that area where you question what are your values? Why do we value what we value is an intrinsic part of that issue. Since, put it this way, in the last few years I have been involved mostly in writing down ideas and exploring ideas, but a great part of it has to do with this marvelous location in which we found ourselves here. And I thank you. Actually, I thought we were going to do a panel up here.
We are. We're here. You're taking all the introduction.
Oh, come on up here.
So that's our first member of the panel. Second member will be Gary. Come on up, Gary. Gary is a associate pioneer right now, and of course was spent just about every bit of his life in the South Bay area. So Gary is our current reigning president of the Historical Society, and he really is somebody who cares about that job. If you raise a fact about Manhattan Beach, he'll go dig into it and try to prove you wrong. Not on purpose, he just wants to double check, and then he finds out you're wrong. But anyway, love Gary, and thrilled to have him on the panel.
I'm going to pass this to Gary, and you will discover once it's brushed clean, it'll sound much better.
I'm Gary Mccauley, and yes, I've lived my entire life virtually right here in the beach cities. My parents, I'm not a native. I was born in Minneapolis, and yeah, Minneapolis. And my parents moved here when I was 3 months old. So I don't remember that, of course. So I've lived my entire life in the beach cities, Redondo, Hermosa, Manhattan Beach, and grandmother lived in El Segundo. So always up and down the beach cities. Our cities, of course, are, they're tied together. Our history, the history, when you get into it, you find out that Redondo and Hermosa, Manhattan Beach, obviously, the beach cities are tied together very tightly. In fact, probably some of you out there went to Redondo, like I did. Go Redondo. I met my wife at Redondo, actually. I did do a brief stint down in scenic San Pedro, because when I first decided that I wanted to buy a house, I couldn't afford it even then. That was a few years ago. So we did a brief time down in San Pedro until we built up a little equity and moved straight back to Manhattan Beach. So I got involved with the Historical Society, just so you know, well, my boys were born here too, and they went to Maricosta, and they went into the scouting program. I ended up, as many parents do, getting drafted as a scout leader. That happens. And I know Anita was involved with scouting quite a bit back in the day. I started researching the history of the Pinewood Derby, which started in our town, and which is a big Cub Scouting event, and one thing led to another, and here I am as the president of the Historical Society. Pretty much my life has been one of just the facts, and so yes, if a story comes out, I believe in verifying things. I want sources and corroboration, and yeah, some of the stories in town are not quite as true as we would like them to be. And that upsets people sometimes, so I get a lot of guff from James about it. But that's it in a nutshell. I'm happy to see you all here. I think James' idea to create the Pioneers was an excellent idea, and it's helping us to preserve the history of our community, for which I think there's a great deal of interest. We'd like to see more interest in it, but preservation of the town's history is actually at the main goal of the Historical Society. And that's about all I have to say right now. Time to turn it over to the guy who can really speak to the public.
So the third member of our panel, our esteemed, yes, thanks Gary, our esteemed mayor, and if I had money no object, I would be putting on I would be helping him put on his velvet Saturday Night Live five-timer jacket, as he's the five-timer mayor of our city. Probably never done before and likely never done again.
Okay.
And born and raised, love the guy, Steve Napolitano.
Thank you, James. I didn't know I was supposed to monologue up here, so I'd really rather have Don introduce me. 'Cause I actually really don't like talking about myself. But I guess for background, my parents, my dad came out here with the migration after the war, and he served briefly in Korea. And then as soon as he graduated college back at the University of Maine, he said enough of this cold weather and jumped in the station wagon with some friends and hit Route 66 and ended up out here in the beach cities. Bumped around a couple places and then landed here where he met my mom. He worked aerospace. He was at TRW for over 30 years and also North American Rockwell and some of the other names, Douglas and others. And so they worked at those jobs, and so bought a little house, 800 square feet on Walnut Avenue, where they still live and where I grew up for most of my years. And there's, as I said, they're still there. He's 90. My mom has turned 83. Dad turns 91 this year in a couple months. But so they got started, me started here, went to all the local schools, Pacific Center, which is no longer there, Maricosta. Stayed local for college. I went to Loyola Marymount, graduated from there, a couple other local schools. Went to the Loyola Law School, got involved with the city, got to meet a lot of great people on the way. Some that, many more that didn't make the slideshow here that I miss from once being a young whippersnapper, as Jan Dennis would call me, to these days. But along the way, just so many wonderful people with so many great stories. And I just think of myself as extremely lucky and fortunate to have grown up here. And so I thank my parents every time I see them. And then they look past me and go, "Where are the grandkids?" Anyway.
All right, so now the panel's in full-fledged. Come on up here.
Can I ask you a question? Yeah, I'd like to make a comment.
Go ahead.
Steve is too humble to tell you that he was the youngest person to be elected to city council. That's pretty special.
26 years old, is that when it was?
Yes.
Yeah. So still going with the political career. As a mayor, I'm thrilled to have him here on our panel. I thought he would decline for political reasons in case somebody tried to throw politics into it. Anyway, so I gave these guys a couple of questions ahead of time so they knew what I would ask. But you know, as Steve said, we've had an awful lot of great people present, and as I've created this group out of my own vision, I kind of wanted to ask you three, what does this group mean to you?
Their family.
There's that microphone.
No, I'd rather shout. Okay.
Hold on, we gotta turn that one on.
Are you going to stand too?
You're taller than I am. Anyhow, this group, like all of you, are family to the degree that we share interest, we share appreciation for a place. We are all, each and every one of us, a book filled with stories, and we are, almost every one of us, certainly those in the pioneers, a book sharing 50 years worth of place. This sharing is bound, if it is an inspired place, to inspire the process of living. And that has certainly been the situation for me, and it's certainly been the situation for these two very special people who are seated next to me. And I see out there in the group here many who we would like to embrace more closely, many for whom we'd like to hear those stories that inspire. So that's what life is about, isn't it? You want inspiration, and you want that inspiration to be about something that is justifiably great. And by virtue of good luck, my parents discovered it for me. For many of you, it's by virtue of good judgment. And that interests me. I like people who use good judgment, and the community is attracting a great many of this type of personality. So aren't we lucky?
Yes. This microphone doesn't work.
I think we just got to talk into it, swallow the thing. First and foremost, I want to thank James for putting it all together. I mean, you really can't thank you enough because it's nothing I would have thought of, and so I love the fact that you have your history from Alaska where they did it and you brought it here. What does it mean to me personally? I just think it's a wonderful opportunity to connect with each other and connect with our history. My generation, maybe one or two after me, but not so much before, kind of bridge the analog and digital ages, where when I got up and my brother, and when it was summertime, we left in the morning and we didn't come back until it was dark, and so we roamed the city streets. And I give credit to Russ Lesser, who described his childhood the same as what mine was at the time, which was you walked around and you found friends and you made friends, and you said, hey, you want to meet at Dorsey and play softball at 2 o'clock. And so people would round up other friends, you'd go play softball. We didn't have any gloves or anything, it was a big blooper ball. But we had fun. You did that, you went to the beach, same thing, you'd pick up a game of volleyball, basketball, whatever it was, you'd roam around, find friends, find things to do that day, try and stay out of trouble the best you could. But, it's those kind of connections that have also been lost because money, people not being able to afford to live here and move out and everything, but maintaining those connections is tough. It's tougher today. As much as we are connected with digital and social media, we're also disconnected because everyone's just sitting behind their computer screens. They don't come out and gather. And I think we get lazy with our history. And God love her, she's here. But, Jan wrote the books, but we can't just rely on books. What really matters too, because everybody here who can be considered a pioneer has just hundreds, if not thousands, and among us probably a million stories of what it was like growing up in Manhattan Beach, about their particular experience and everything. And so being able to relay all those oral histories, I think, is fantastic. So it goes beyond the pages and goes to people, and it keeps us all connected. And as more of us enter into pioneerhood, I hope it continues and I hope it grows.
Having the questions in advance doesn't always help. Thanks. He's putting that out for me. Well, as I said earlier, preservation of history is kind of a big thing for me, and getting all the stories down. And so when James came up with the idea of creating this group, I was really, really happy. And we've, I should say he has recorded some stories that otherwise would have been lost. We've lost some of our pioneers already. These stories are essential to the character of our town, and when people tell them, when we gather together as a group and start telling stories, it reminds each of us of other stories, and we say, oh yeah, I remember that, or oh, I can tell a better story than that. And so it stimulates the preservation of our town's history. I think it's just a wonderful thing that you came up with, and I'm very, very happy that it's happened, and I'm very happy for everybody to join. If any of you are not members, please consider joining the Historical Society and joining the Pioneers.
Awesome. Gary, I'll let you hold the microphone there and fire away on what has been your favorite Pioneer meeting memory, barring the one that we already shared that I had planned to use.
That's kind of funny because we actually have the same favorite memory, and I'll let him tell this story. So beyond that, I guess finding a favorite story, and again, this comes down to knowing the question ahead of time doesn't make it easier, because there have been so many wonderful stories, and I really encourage everybody to come to the Pioneer meetings. They've run the gamut from my stuff, which is, up to people like Lynn and Paul, and Steve's presentation. I mean, some of these guys set really high bars, but everything in between, and the stories are always marvelous, and people sit there, and this is where our story in common exemplifies all this. People tell these stories, and they say, oh yeah, remember this. And that's what it's all about, is remembering these stories.
No, I'm with you. I remember this. Favorite memory was not mine, that's for sure. I gave it. My presentation was not good. Bill Fornell, right before me, he gave a great presentation. There have been so many great ones. My favorite memory was mine being finished and being able to watch other people. That's my favorite memory.
I would say, which of your children is your favorite? And I'm not going to answer that. The last one, of course, being at my age, it would be the most recent one. That was Lynn and Paul here. They did a marvelous presentation. And I found that they have lived a life very similar to the life that I have lived. Paul being a boat owner, and a builder, a man handy with tools. It's marvelous, and I'm looking forward to knowing both of them a little better. And I think you will be discovering people of great interest to you as you enter into the exchange with other great stories here.
Thanks, Don. His point there, when Paul was giving his presentation, I was like, wow, they're going to really get along. So glad you guys, hope you switched numbers. Hopefully you're going to have coffee soon and then a boat ride, because you certainly have a lot in common, and that would be great that I brought you two together. I'd be very proud of that. The story that sticks in my mind was we had some Greek ladies who claimed that the streets in the flower-named streets, poinsettia and Dianthus, had something to do with their family. Of course, Gary dug right into that. He proved that wasn't exactly correct. But we didn't ruin their presentation. They were nice stories. But the bottom line was, here, I lived in Greece when I was in the Air Force for 2.5 years, so I was dying to hear their story. It was very interesting. Her Greek parents chasing them around. They were growing flowers on any empty lot that they could find, whether they had permission or not, you know, and he had the daughters out and the granddaughters in the neighborhood trying to sell the flowers that they were growing up the street and picking and bringing around the neighborhood. And somebody called the house and said, hey, your daughter's outside and it's raining pretty hard. You should come and get her and take her home. So he went and got her and dropped her in another neighborhood. So that was a good one. And then, so thrilling to hear their story. And as they were, the other gentleman that was there that day, Glenn Hackmore, who also 90-something years old, has lived here a very long time. When we roll out the new building that will be near the real estate office. The real estate office, I guess it was his brother's real estate company way back in the early 1900s. There was a big age difference between the two. Anyway, great stories, all of them. But suddenly, one of the Greek girls says to Glenn, well, wait a minute, what years were you at Redondo Union High School? And he said, well, from here to here. And she said, oh, well, did you know my great uncle so-and-so? And he sat up real straight in the chair and said, yeah, he broke some of my ribs. We're all, what? And he tells the story about how that guy threw open the school door and the doorknob smashed him in the ribs and he went down with some broken ribs, and he knew exactly who that great uncle was. So to me, that was like, wow, here we've got, you know, two pioneers telling stories from kind of opposite corners of town or whatever, and had that intersect. So that was my favorite story for sure. And there are others, and hopefully a lot more to come. So Don, what would you like to see the Historical Society do to further preserve our history? And I'll let you use this one.
Okay. Throw money at it. Actually, the high school, is that the question? Manhattan Beach High School?
No.
Historic Society.
Yeah, the Historical Society.
Okay, yeah, the Historical Society is doing a pretty good job, actually. And in fact, I'll be sitting at the Old Hometown Fair, managing our booth there for a few hours. And I'm looking forward to it, looking forward to meeting all of you and perhaps exchanging some ideas. Collecting old photographs is a major part of it. And whatever we can do to get into the news or have more events like this, or just stimulate James to keep running, that's, I think, the way to do it. And I'm really interested in hearing what they'll have to say.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to own this one. I don't think it's the Historical Society that has to do a whole lot more here. I think it's the city that has to do a whole lot more. The city owns everything that's in that Historical Society, and yet we have kept it in a building that is sorely in need of repair and upkeep. Does not have an alarm system. I probably shouldn't say that. Certainly not on tape. We'll edit that out in post-production. But I don't think it has any fire protection. It has barely anything.
Smoke alarm.
Smoke alarm. That the batteries are probably need to be changed out. It's beeping now, and I think the termites are holding hands and keeping the place up. So I really think it's to the city. I've made this pitch before to my colleagues on council that I think that we need to really set aside some capital improvement funds to redo that place and expand it, frankly. There's a building behind where it is right now, and if we could keep the frame of the building where it is, but change out the wood for the stuff that doesn't burn, and keep that as a facade in front, but expand that in the back so we can have some real displays. We can have some climate-controlled maintenance of all the records, because it's subject to silverfish, it's subject to rot, subject to moisture. And we need to save our history, and I made that pitch to my colleagues, and we decided to put some money aside, but we need to put a whole lot more aside, because this is our history. No one else is going to, if we don't take care of it, who else is? We've relied on others, we've relied on a small volunteer group, and frankly, we can afford to do better, and we should do better. So that's what I think the city should do to preserve and help the historical society.
Thanks, Steve. Actually, I really, really appreciate it because it's been a few years of an uphill
I
battle.
can thank him too, because he sat me down and we had to talk about it.
Well, like I said, I got involved with this. Sorry, I don't want to make it too loud. I got involved with this because I was doing a little bit of historical research, and I realized that we had 100 years of our town's history in the form of newspapers, all stored in this little wooden building that is more than 100 years old with very little fire protection, and I just had a heart attack. So I got involved with the Historical Society. The first thing I did was I succeeded over a period of time in convincing the county library to take our newspapers under their protection, and they are now upstairs in a relatively safe building, I would say. The very next thing that happened is when I became president, somebody came along and said, hey, we have a shack that used to be one of the original real estate offices in Manhattan Beach. How would you like it? I'm kind of going, oh man, that's going to be a project. And it has turned out to be a project, but we have successfully documented that it was a real estate office in 1927. It's a rare thing to have. There are other things that we've been working on, but right at the moment, we do have a lot of our stuff in a building that it does actually have an alarm system, so don't try breaking in. But it's not the best of security in the world, and quite honestly, I think it could be much improved. Fire protection is pretty hard under the circumstances, it's difficult. But we have things in there like this book right here, which is book number 2. Book number 1 is on display, of the ordinances of the city of Manhattan Beach. It's fascinating to read this stuff. In 1915, they decided to rename 37th Street Rosecrans. which is kind of interesting if you ask me. In 1918, the city decided to go dry, and it banned all sales of alcohol, unless you're a pharmacist, you know, for medicinal purposes only, kind of alcohol. But these things are treasures, and right now they're not particularly well preserved, and so I really appreciate your efforts, Steve, to bring the rest of council on board with preserving our town's history. History is really ephemeral. It's just in the telling and the retelling, a lot of history gets lost and twisted and so forth, as James has so carefully pointed out. And recently, I don't know if you saw it in the news, but the nation of Brazil lost their national museum to a devastating fire. 200 years worth of museum work, 20 million artifacts up in smoke. The only thing left is a meteorite, which can withstand those kind of things. So the city has directed staff to begin a preservation process. We're doing an inventory now, one of the first inventories we've done in many, many years. It's labor intensive, and of course we're trying to digitize it and make, bring us up into, we are in the 21st century now, right? By a couple of years or so, we're trying to upgrade that, and I have great hopes if we can all just pull together and work to preserve our history.
Good, I hope so.
Gary, to close, we have one more question there, and then we'll take it to audience question, and I'd like to sort of put this to everybody. What more could we do with these meetings and videos? Help me brainstorm. What more could we do? So Gary, take that one.
Well, I did think about this one a little bit at least, and in fact, I thought about it after our last meeting. We have wonderful speakers, and we fill the time pretty easily. The time just flies right by. And then at the end of the meeting, when the people that are in charge of the building, when Heather actually needs to get going, we all want to stand around and talk. Because these meetings really do bring back a lot of memories and stimulate a lot of conversation, a lot of interpersonal relationship between the people that attend. And so I think our next meeting perhaps could be maybe a single speaker and then more of a social time. I haven't had a chance to talk about it. I'm pitching this to you for the first time, okay. But a little more social time, I think, because everybody really does, when we all get together, there are a lot of things to say to one another, and I'd like to see those things stimulated a little bit.
I mean, the obvious thing is digital, trying to do more on there, and I don't know if there's a link on the city's website to the different presentations. I mean, that'd be great as part of history, and having a historical page on there. But beyond that, I would say that more of this, and that goes back to what I was talking about earlier between the analog and digital, bring it back to the analog. Touch more people, make more connections. I think we've got a great Rotary group that's ever growing, so making a presentation to them and trying to get folks in the Rotary involved, Kiwanis, school groups, classrooms, doing a speaking tour to the elementary classes, because those are your future pioneers. And so the more groups and people that you can go out and talk to and let them know that you exist and let them know what it's about and have them share their stories as well. Because a lot of them might not be aware of it, but they have family history here or they have pictures and things that they want to share. I think that just expands. It's something that you need to grow and expand, and to do that organically, you just need to touch more people. And I think, as we continue with these meetings here, though, maybe we can bring in more by talking to more of the other groups that we have out there.
Okay, my thoughts are that we have a pretty good group right here now, and improvements would occur when you go out and you tell your friends about us, and every time we get together there will be more people sharing. I imagine all of you have taken or recorded and copies placed in safe locations. And perhaps the best thing that we can do right now is to pass it on to you.
Do we have any questions out there that anybody would like to ask? Yeah, Claire would like to ask something.
So I have a question, maybe two parts. So probably because I'm a teen librarian too. So I was
Too young to ask a question.
so I was just curious as to participation kind of intergenerationally, and if you've ever thought, especially with the technology piece and sharing oral histories, possibly collaborating with teens who would do a listening booth or record things more orally than purely video, because that might be something I don't know of how much teens participate in the meetings or interviewing some of the pioneers. So that would be my question.
Yeah.
To date, it's sort of been myself and Gary and Heather who helps put it together, Lolly who brings some treats to the meetings, but it's a pretty small crowd making this thing happen. It would be awesome to involve teens, to perhaps maybe a good way to start would be their audiovisual group over at school that could come and use it as a place to do that. Because as you can see, my little $200 camera is what's doing all this, and it's not really a great job, but just to start with that. So as we grow this a little bit, and it's not all just on my shoulders, I get a few more people that are willing to volunteer to help and to make it happen, then we can do a little more outreach. I know that even the Historical Society has suffered. One of our past presidents who was very involved, Steve Meisenholder, had a stroke, and he's not been involved for about a year. I think the kids are finally coming back to the Historical Society for a little class.
Oh yeah, we have kids come through fairly regularly.
So
A little too regular.
that is something that we should definitely try to figure out. If you have a connection for me to reach out to, that would help. We have had a wonderful teacher from Miracosta gave a 45-minute presentation on the history of Miracosta, which if you've not seen that video, that's fantastic. It goes back to the Japanese being put in intern camps here during World War II and beyond. So some very interesting history just there. But yeah, to involve kids at some level would be great. I can't even get my own children to show up unless I ask her to videotape. And it's my birthday, so she really had to come. But so no, the kids are like, what? History? Oh my God. But if we could say, hey, audio-visual, come get some credit, we need help videotaping this thing, to have somebody be like a social media person, hashtagging pioneers so that all the old people can get on Instagram. So throw me your connections and ideas and I'll see what Gary and I can do with them. Did anybody else have anything to add to that? All right. Question, Jerry.
Yeah, just in terms of thoughts, just thinking about now since you asked what you might be able to also do.
Sometimes it goes on.
Microphone. Anita's
Yeah.
thing, battery might be done.
Is that too far or something?
I don't think he was holding the mic up.
Let's try another one.
Oh, with theirs.
Anita, try this.
You can hold it a little closer.
It's a new one. Maybe your battery died.
I could hear with yours, but I couldn't hear with their microphone.
And when he's talking,
Can you hear me?
You put it on again.
Can you hear me when I speak into the microphone?
Oh, okay.
I think it's working. Everybody else can hear me. It sounds pretty loud to me. But in asking the question, what else can the pioneers do? And I'm like, I don't know everybody in the room. I'm Jerry O'Connor. I qualify. I haven't joined. I will. I've been in town I owned a home for 3 years. I've been in the area almost 40 now. So, but I'm not from here. I'm not a native. I moved here almost 40 years ago. But as things change, I think clearly our seniors are an important part of our community, and if anything, they're a growing, more important part of our community based on our demographics, I think. But things change, and I think it would be really beneficial for the people that have been here a long time to maybe have a city staffer, if they were willing, to come in and give us kind of some historical perspective. How have the demographics changed in town over the 40 or 50 or 60 years that some of us have been here? How has the city budget changed? How has housing prices changed? Because a lot of us remember what it used to be like, and many of us have trouble keeping up with what it's actually like today. And that would kind of give us some historical perspective. Might be interesting. Just a thought.
Yeah.
I will say to that
That's what the Historical Society is for.
at some point, I have trouble getting people to volunteer. That might be a great spot to like fill somebody from the city in when I'm having trouble getting volunteers. That's a great idea. You'll have to let me know who might be a good person in the city staff that's lived here for a long time themselves that might be a good person. I mean, I've had public works guys come to my house who lived their whole life here. Forget his name right now, but if you think of somebody that might be interested in putting together some old statistics for the city and do a half-an-hour presentation at one of our meetings, that would be great. And then I could use that as a spot when I didn't get a volunteer. So with that, and I have another question here, but with that thought is that I am looking for volunteers all the time. I know that this young man back here is a former police officer in the city of Manhattan Beach for many years, so would love to hear your story. So if you would like to put some slides together and tell us your stories, we'd love to have you.
I talked to my wife about that.
All right, good. 20 to 30 minutes, a few pictures and a few stories is all it takes.
Not just a couple, but we'll do our best.
Right, I hear you. All right.
Statutes of limitations.
Do we have another question?
Hi, my name is Milan McBride. I'm one of the co-facilitators of the Community Interactive Forum, which we started 3 years ago, and my heart is full to see that this is taking roots in our community. And I'm very pleased that the Pioneers is here, and there are a couple of ideas and thoughts that I have. First, I have a question, because the last information I got was you stopped collecting information about the history of Manhattan Beach up to something like 1950 because of storage issues. And so perhaps that's another, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry.
Okay. So I think that might be another part of your task list. And in a way to connect the community to the Pioneers Project, I would suggest that perhaps we proclaim a Pioneers Day in Manhattan Beach, and we have a big event in Pollywog Park. And the the Historical Museum is right there. And so that may be another way of connecting with a larger, wider scope in terms of the community. Now, this Community Interactive Forum is composed of a partnership of 6 nonprofits, including the city and the county library. Without the library, we would not have had this room. And they have committed to having every 4th Thursday of the month where we do talk about things that have happened or are happening in Manhattan Beach, so that then we can continue to really understand what is really precious to us here in Manhattan Beach. We moved, Patrick and I, in 1982. It took me maybe 4 or 5 years to really get to know the city. At the time, there was a welcome wagon, and now that's gone. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping that I will be able to promote with being the chair of the Manhattan Beach Senior Resources Committee, and we work very closely with the Older Adult Program. And in fact, we were the movers of having a very vigorous and full Older Adult Program now at the Jocelyn Center. And we started out, when we started looking at the issue of the seniors, we found out that the budget was about $25,000 to $35,000, 5 hours a week for senior programs. And so we started that, and now we have about, close to $250,000, and we have a full-time manager. So I think with the different hosts of the forum, we have the Historical Society, Manhattan Beach Conservancy, the County Library, Manhattan Beach Senior Resource Committee, the Older Adult Program, and the Friends of the Library, and other programs. We reach out to the nonprofits where we can bring them here and talk about how the nonprofits and how the events are impacting the community. And we have had some excellent results. And may I just take the opportunity that in November, the fourth Thursday, usually it's a tradition that we celebrate the success of our year, and we will have a musical performance, and that will be also maybe a good time to then socialize some more. And I'm inviting everybody to come right here, and Claire Moore is our coordinator. So I hope that we can continue this. I'm very, very excited about the pioneers, and I am a gerontologist, and I think that will explain to everyone why I am excited about the pioneers. Thank you for listening. And
I'm worried about my parking meter out there.
So, special thanks to Milan for putting this on. Thanks to Claire for having the library available to us and making this facilitating to allow the technology to work and all the chairs to be out. So thank you both very much for making all this happen. Were there any other questions out there that we had tonight? Yes.
Just want to make a quick correction. Thank you very much for the gentleman to correct me that this forum is every fourth Tuesday. It seems like I said Thursday. Sorry about that.
Okay. Any other questions out there? Well, thank you very much for helping me celebrate my birthday. That was very nice. My heart is full tonight. That's awesome. Thank you to my panel very, very much. I love all three of you guys, and I'm honored to have you in my life, as well as to help me make this group happen. Thank you guys all for coming, and have a great night.
Hello. James is going to cut his birthday cake. James is going to cut his birthday cake, so make sure you have a piece. Would you like? Would you like a piece of James?
Of course, yeah. No, actually, yes, because of the son that I first met.
We will bring you a piece.
At the first time with Derby, and I was tracking him down, and
it's okay, but I'll bring you a small piece.
one of those things. And it turned out that she was a dead mother and all this stuff, and yeah, I have a bunch of pictures. It was marvelous. I actually, that's one thing I meant to tell you about, and I totally forgot, is outside of the society. Are you online? Are you online? Historical Society, and there's a page that's titled Get Involved, and you can just join online. It's in January 24th. Probably a day that I'm out of town. It's always something. Yes, ma'am. If you were... I know it. I was born in Minneapolis. And in 1953, probably fewer hospitals than there are now. So the odds are good. How long are you in Minnesota? Yeah, so we're almost on the same track, right? So I was born in December of 53, and by January of 54, my parents moved out here. And I still have a whole lot of family. My family went back to Hazelwood territory in Minnesota, yeah. And they, you know, as soon as they moved me in town, and and started farming. So there's still, in fact, when I went back to visit them, a lot of them are still living in Booney Grove Township, which is still not a full-grown town. It's just a collection of farms in the township, right? And you kind of look around and go, oh, we don't know here. There you go.
Oh boy.
You know, I should know that, but it's been so long since I've looked that I'll check it out. Well, are you a pioneer? Oh, yeah. Oh, good. You skipped one in January. It's cold and bare. Anyway. There you go. Yeah. This happened, doesn't it? I don't know. Yeah, because, see, there's a lot of these folks. I'll bring another one. I don't know if a lot of them. If they lived here long enough, they lived of course, it didn't exist.
Several of them went to because like dispersed and everything.
No, I think that's when they opened it. Yeah. I think they all over. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. No, I don't. And seriously, I think often about just wearing a shirt area because it's so hard to remember everything. Could help a lot. Pleasure to meet you. Pleasure. Come again. Well, we're doing what we can. I'm really happy that Steve got elected on the council again because he's a big proponent of local history. And up to this point, it's been a battle because it's tough money. And it's tough money like we're just rate against everything else, and it's often a market. I know the market like Kentucky over there, and I know. And so that goes back to it's more than I'm really happy to something like in Brazil has all the only thing we have and that would be all we know about the history of Manhattan.
In the filing cabinet.
Well, think about the Historical Society. We're gonna get.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Well, Gary would know.
Spare time. Yeah. I could do this non-stop. I'm sorry?
We're having our picture.
Oh, picture, okay. Okay. I'll stand behind. Oh, okay, I'll stand on the side.
All right, hold on, Steve, Don.
Yeah.
Do I have a flag from now on instead? Hold on, we're getting two more people, Anita.
Already, hurry up.
All right.
Oh, wait so long, I'm gonna sit down.
Oh no, almost there, we're almost there.
You got the flags in it too?
Yep. 1, 2, 3. Okay, everyone, good job.
Great.
Thank you.
Can I sit?
Okay, I got your arm here.
There you go.
Wonderful to see you.
Sure. What do you want to do?
How are you? I'm good. How are you?
January 26th.
I'll do it.
Oh, birthday cake.
Send me an email.
Thanks for
Go
coming.
away.
I'll have everything down. I'll talk to James. James,
Yeah.
remind me of this because I'll forget. Pioneer Day in Manhattan Beach. Yeah, we'll have.
Maybe when the historical society starts. How about
Gary, we'll put Gary in charge of that one.
All right, Pioneer Day. When do you want to declare Pioneer Day?
Like when, at what meeting?
Yeah, what month?
months, and they're probably, it's better to be.
We're thinking about it, but the other day.
Well, we have to declare it though, council meeting first.
Yeah.
Plan.
So anytime you're ready, I can make it happen. So you just let us know when you're
We're right here, so I don't lose it off.
Mayor in April, so let's declare before.
It should have been taken out of the museum, but I had to have something to show and tell you.
No, I'm glad you did.
I would say in
No,
May or
It's
June.
awesome.
Have a tourist.
We'll get there. But was Steve supporting us on council? It's
Hey,
enormous.
there's
I really appreciate it.
Power Talks over here. Do you know when the real estate building's ready? Do you have any kind of date that you're?
Yeah, but what's me though? I have to approve it.
He wants to declare a Pioneer Day.
Yeah, we're so tight right now. I was shooting for the second week of November of this year, and it just isn't going to happen. Even the water people the flood control people are sort of occupying the space that we wanted to put it into.
So what about shooting for early May?
So I'm thinking, well, maybe even earlier if we can, but maybe. Because the thing is, in January, February, it turns into rain. So it's hard to schedule something, so. Yeah, well, when it does, yeah, you say that. I know, that rains.
Listen, he needs to put a date on the calendar for council for us to declare a Pioneer Day.
Let's talk about it a little bit, so I don't just off the cuff give him a date and then say, boy, I didn't think about St. Patrick's Day.
We just want to recognize.
How much time do you need to give him a date? Do you need 2 weeks?
It's not so much for me to declare something at council with the colleagues. It's really for you guys to plan, especially Pioneer Day and the events and
Well, I'm going to meet with Mark Lehman shortly. He owes me a meeting, and when we do, then I'll talk to him because a lot depends on what Parks and Rec is doing. Because they've got stuff planned for the park, right? Plus, generally, if we're going to have an event that involves Parks and Rec people to set up.
So give us 2 weeks to figure that out, hopefully.
Yes.
3 weeks, he says. 3 weeks to figure that out.
Nothing goes that fast.
Lolly is still in the board, right?
The Historical Society Board.
Lolly is a member of the Senior Resource Committee. And so I can tell her so that then.
Mark Lehman. Word is
that we're having a meeting.
When